Hello, fellow investors. Welcome to the Financial Podcast. My name is Lucas.
And my name is Marcus, and today we're going to discuss nest eggs and how they relate to the FIRE movement.
Yeah, this is not going to be a video so much about the FIRE community, at least not this video. We'll probably do a more in-depth dive into the FIRE community in the future, but this is going to focus especially on nest egg. Before we start, I'll explain to you in a simple way what a nest egg is. Have you heard the children's story of the golden goose with the golden eggs?
Yeah, I have at least. Can't remember it off the top of my head, but yeah, I've heard of it.
I think it's a really good parallel to demonstrate what a nest egg is supposed to be. So in this story, of course, the character finds a goose which lays golden eggs, and he sells these eggs every day to get enough money, basically, to eat. Similarly to how an actual chicken or how an actual hen lays egg that you can eat of. But one day they decide to kill the goose, which of course isn't good because they get, similarly to an actual hen, they get a lot of money that day, but then they spend it and then they have no more golden eggs in the future. So this is sort of a kind of weird parallel that at least came to my mind when I first heard of a nest egg, because a nest egg could be likened to a money machine, which consists of money that you have invested into different investment vehicles, such as index funds, but it can also be real estate. Real estate is a really common one. And the purpose of this is not only to generate you more money, but to generate you enough money so that you can live upon these investments alone without having to kill the golden goose, i.e. sell your investments. So for example, if you invested in only rental properties, your goal would be to buy enough rental properties so that you cover your living expenses each month so that you don't have to work anymore.
So it's basically like investing enough so that you can draw a salary from your investments in a way.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. So I first heard of this concept quite a while back, and I didn't really understand it because to me at that time, the first time I heard of a nest egg, of course I understood what it was because the principle is quite simple, but I had no idea how to get started on it. This is similarly to what I've complained about in the past, and the reason why I started this channel with you is that as someone who does not make a lot of money, I did not know of clear ways that you could get started on building this nest egg for yourself. Because, of course, we all like that idea, right? To get money without having to work for it. Or that you put in the work up front and then you can generate the profits from it.
Money
Yeah,
from
for the rest of your life.
afterwards without actually putting in physical or mental labor into the to get out money from it.
Yeah, because this could allow you to do so many more things in your life. Maybe you would still keep on working, but you wouldn't have to work as much.
Or you would have a greater sense of calm since you know that work isn't the only source of income that you have, which is actually a very relevant thing to talk about right now, because I think that's actually, I've heard a lot of people give young people in particular the advice that you shouldn't like spread yourself so thin that you only rely on one thing to generate your income. So in this case, like a nest egg would almost be essential because you need the extra form of income that you will get from the nest egg. Then you have your job, then maybe you have a side business. All these kind of things become a beautiful whole in the end for young people right now, according to some financial advisors, that you should spread out your risks like you would on a shares portfolio or something like that. You would do the same with your sources of income, and in that case a nest egg could be part of that.
So this could be a great additional source of income even if you're still working. And the possibilities when you have a great enough nest egg or big enough nest egg is basically limitless what you can do with it. But let's back up a bit. Let's first, as usual in this video, we try or we like to go to Investopedia to check the basic definitions to know that we're all on the same page and talking about the same things. So, according to Investopedia, a nest egg is a substantial sum of money or other assets that have been saved or invested for a specific purpose. So, It doesn't necessarily have to be for retirement. It can just be to beat inflation. That has been a very common way of looking at it at the past, because as we always say in this channel, if you just leave your money in the bank, you're basically giving up money.
Yeah, you're losing money. It's also a form of extra income, like we just discussed, and a passive form of income, which is always sought after. But could I actually ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you say nest egg, do you mean all the investments and all your assets that you currently have, including maybe a house that is the mortgages, well, the mortgage is paid off, or do you just like include parts of your investments that is supposed to be part of this nest egg, or how do you deem what is your nest egg, so to speak? Could a house, for instance, be part of the nest egg, or does it have to generate income? Is that like the requirement?
That's a really great question. The short answer is I think it depends, but most people I think would agree that it has to be cash flow positive. It has to generate cash, or at least have the potential to generate you cash on a regular basis, say annual or monthly basis.
That's what I'd say too, because I actually watched a video about the nest egg and nest eggs for this video, and they talked about a guy that has had houses and cars and all things like this, but these should probably not be included into a nest egg, even though they are a form of even maybe liquid assets, because he could probably sell them if he wanted to, but they're still not part of the nest egg, since they're not, like you said, they don't contribute to like his active income. But what was confusing is that some people tend to like count all their income as a whole, you know, when they talk about these kinds of things. And a nest egg is not this. So it's not all of your assets combined. It's specific assets that you have set aside, usually for retirement or as a past form of income, I guess.
Yeah, very true. And we could have a whole other conversation if you can even count a car as an asset when it comes to investing.
Yeah, probably not. I'd argue for probably not. Yeah.
But it should be something that has the ability to generate money on a regular basis. So a good question that comes to my mind then is, would actually, for example, index funds even count? Because index funds get reinvested automatically.
So that you get more shares or more of the fund automatically, and you don't basically receive any dividends before you actually sell the fund in the end. Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah, and I'm gonna answer it myself. The answer is that it actually the answer is that it actually counts still, because what you can do with, in the case of index funds, is that you just sell off them, for example, annually. So you have to determine beforehand how much you're gonna need annually. Say in my case that I would need 1,500 euros a month to support myself. That means I'm gonna need 18,000 a year. So that means that my total investments should increase in value, at least on most years, by 18,000 or more.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're gonna have years when it increases by more and years when it's gonna increase by less. All of this is from the book Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins, where he interviews the major financial investors of our time, and they say that this is part of the problem with this strategy, because it can bite you in the ass at the end. Because it really depends. Like when you just start out, when you have enough money to cover your expenses, if you have a couple of really bad years, if the stock market has a couple of really bad years,
like right now, for instance.
Yeah, for example, right now, if you would have had to turn on the cash flow right before the corona crash, it could have potentially, depending a bit still on how it evolves, but it could have been so detrimental for your overall portfolio that you're not going to be able to generate more money or even as much money as you take out, meaning that you're going to start eating into the principal each year when you take out your money.
Yeah, so you're going to eat up your golden goose, so to speak. And actually, I have in different like Reddits and stuff like that, I've recently seen that a lot of people have chosen to return to work just because of what you said. Like they used to live on their investments and things like this, but due to the crash and other bad years, if they invested in certain type of financial instruments that turned sour for whatever reason, they would actually have to cancel their retire early part and go back to work because now they can't live off their principal anymore. It generated just enough cash if nothing really bad happened at least a few years in a row. But when it actually happened, they have no choice but to return. And of course, one thing that we should mention in that case is that sometimes I guess people can be quite hard hit because they can't really return to work anymore because, well, stuff happens and fields move on and stuff like that. It's not so easy to go back maybe to work when you have had five or 10 years off. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But here comes the good part. If you just have the ability to generate more money and don't have to retire as early, if you generate enough that you could actually invest in, as you said, like dividend yield, dividend yielding stocks, or the real estate market where you get the rental payment, that is a safer option. But then it's not completely safe either, because now we're probably going to face, due to the massive unemployment rates at the moment, especially in the States again,
Yeah.
a lot of people are not getting their rental
Paid. Yeah.
or they're not able to pay their rent.
Yeah, and
So-
companies are not paying out as much in dividends as they might in
Yeah.
good years.
Yeah, so as usually, nothing is completely safe, but again, that's why you have to diversify, and like, that's life. You're never completely safe. You could die tomorrow for whatever dumb reason, but you have to. It's still better than to do nothing. Like, this will probably work for 90% who do this, like probably more even. And then if you do this and another method, like, you're pretty well defended. Like, you
Nothing
can
is-
only minimize your risks so far.
Yeah, nothing is bulletproof, but this takes you pretty far at least.
Yeah, exactly. At least you have a vest, bulletproof. Oh, you have a vest now.
Bulletproof vest. Yeah, it might not
Yeah,
cover every shot, but most of them it will.
yeah,
Even though you might take a hit.
yeah. So that's basically the idea. For me, I think it's very exciting, because even if you this sort of is gonna relate now to the FIRE community, which again we won't speak too much about in this video, but we'll mention. And this of course stands for financial independence, retire early. When you build a nest egg, you have the option to partially retire or completely retire for a while early, because you can, even from quite a young age, if you're able to build up enough capital and invest it wisely, you can live off these investments and have sort of like an early retirement and then go back to work later.
Yeah, I think we have all heard. I remember I heard a particular story about like a post-delivery man that he obviously had a job which doesn't pay a lot in salary, but for years, ever since he got his job at a very young age, below 20, he saved his money and put them into, I think it actually was index funds or something similar, and he did this for 40 or 50 years, and he retired almost a millionaire. Not quite, but fairly close, because he was an incredibly frugal person that's saved a lot of his money in different financial vehicles that actually were fairly successful. And even though he was just a post-delivery man, he managed to retire very, very wealthy. I can't remember if he was actually a millionaire, but it was fairly close, and that's very good.
If he invested for like 40 years, he probably was.
Yeah, he
like,
could,
actually.
he might have been actually a millionaire. And I know that we, even here in our local community here in the city where I live, we have a couple that the man was a janitor and his wife was a cleaning lady, and they own several apartments in the city where we live, and they are actually like they didn't get so much of their money out of their work, but they managed to get a lot of money out of rental payments, because they're actually fairly wealthy now, even though they work their whole lives as a cleaning lady and as a janitor. So I think that's pretty inspiring, that nest eggs are not only for because that's, I think, a common misconception is that it's only for like millionaires or very, very rich people, that they can put away part of their money and then live off of it in the end. But actually, I think nest eggs are fairly accessible even to regular people, so to speak.
I would say it's a must.
Yeah.
Like personally, I would say it's a must, at least to consider. You don't have to make this whole thing about you becoming a millionaire or anything. Like you can if you want to, but you can just treat it like a basic. For example, if you live in Finland, you can treat it as a basic additional source of income to your pension, like just in case something happens, like that you have a little bit of extra money later on.
More relevant is that you will retire with a fairly good standard of living. Because if you're only gonna rely upon your pension, it's very small usually, like your state pension, and you're not gonna have much financial independence once you retire. In that case, you will be very, very dependent on, well, for instance, the state, and the state won't actually pay you a lot. They will pay you enough to live off, but you won't go on any travels, you won't do all these extra things that you now actually have time for, but you do not have the money anymore since you're not working. Which is a common trap, that you actually, when you retire, then you have all the time in the world, but you have not really the money to spend it anymore if you didn't invest wisely. Which some people do and some people don't, but I definitely agree with you that it's a partial must to start some sort of nest egg, because there's too many stories about people that are in their 40s or 50s and certainly 30s that haven't really invested anything into some sort of pension system, savings whatsoever. So if they have a surprise bill, for instance, they would sink immediately. I think this is something we hear all the time. And that's already bad, that they can't take a surprise bill, but that they haven't saved a dime for retirement, which is something you can do even in your before your 20s. That's pretty bad. You should probably start, because the earlier you start, the better. The more you will have in the end.
And of course, it's not gonna be easy, because in the beginning, like, you're gonna think like you need all the money that you get. Like, it's super difficult to start saving when you haven't saved before. And I really recommend the book Wealthiest Man in Babylon. I think it brings across these points so clearly there. But and you're so tempted in the beginning to say, if I only earned more each month, then I could start saving. But usually what you find, as soon as people get a promotion or get a raise, they just raise their standard of living by that much, or even a little bit more, and just back to square zero.
Yeah, that's when you start hearing about people making over 100K a year, but they're still always broke and have to borrow money because their standard of living has inflated immensely. So, but meanwhile, you can have a janitor who is very frugal and is actually in reality richer than the guy making 100K, because he's crazy in debt and has no assets. Meanwhile, the janitor might have no debt and actually have a fair bit of assets.
I think our point has come, or we've made the point clear. Just, I wanted to leave you with one example, since you brought up the janitor and cleaner couple. So I decided to check out using the compound interest calculator. Of course, I'm not going to take taxes into account now, so that's going to affect as well. This is going to be considered capital income tax. So that's 30%, right, in Finland?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's 30%.
Yeah, but basically, if you would invest in index funds 300 euros each month, for some people 300 euros is a lot. For me, it's a lot because I'm still a student. But if you're working, like 300 euros,
it might actually be a fairly, like, 1/10 of your salary. Wasn't that what the richest man in Babylon recommended?
That's why I took this number from. Yeah, but so if you would invest that each month for basically for the rest of your working life, just that, and have an annual interest rate of 7.7%, which is about the average what the stock market has provided for the last 100 years. Doesn't guarantee the future, but you gotta take your numbers from somewhere. If you assume that interest rate, 300 euros a month for 42 years, you're gonna have 1,134,929 euros by the time if you and me start working today and start doing this, by the time we're 67, we're gonna be millionaires. So I think the janitor couple is probably quite realistic. It's just because the compounding effect is insane. Like, we should probably do a short video on that with animation and everything, but like you don't, like, the human brain has not been designed to think about things exponentially. I think we saw that with the corona cases when they started increasing rapidly. Like it's difficult for us to wrap our heads about things that are growing at an exponential rate. Yeah, so do you have anything more to add?
No, I think we've covered most of it. We could definitely discuss this topic more in detail and more about the FIRE movement and relating topics in different videos. We're probably going to make a few segments about this. But I think we've covered most about what the nest egg portion of.
So in short, you could say that the nest egg is the goal of the FIRE movement, and really for everyone, because if you get there, you don't have to work. What more is there?
Well, yeah. Sometimes you want to work if you work with something you love.
That's actually how I found out about this, because I read back when I first started university, I read a lot of Brian Tracy's book. I'm just going to tell this story real quick. And he talks about nest eggs and just this feeling that when he worked with salespeople, and salespeople have the ability to earn a lot, they can increase their earnings potential quite a lot. And he said that people who achieve this amount, this nest egg amount, that they knew that, oh, now I could actually retire if I want to, so I'm at work because I want to be, not because I have to be, they started performing way better, and they actually started earning more money instead of less money.
Yeah, because they're usually more relaxed always than the people that are incredibly stressed about like financials in general all the time. It's certainly a factor to consider. So
yeah, and I think that's going to be true for most careers. So it's just, and that's really where this idea came from for me. I've been really, a little part of my brain has always been thinking about this ever since I read that book.
It just another part of that is that it definitely plays into the financial independence of the FIRE movement also, because if you can certainly work after you reach this nest egg, but you can choose what you work in now. You don't have to work for money. For instance, you can work in something that you actually enjoy or get something out of other than monetary funds, which is enormous, I think, because a lot of jobs do not otherwise maybe provide this. You might work in an environment that you are not actually comfortable with, but you need the money. But once you have reached the point where you have a nest egg, you can work with whatever you want and work on your, what I think a lot of people do, on your personal projects and things you yourself find important, you want to become better at. So I just think that that's really important also. Not just that you are less stressed, but also that you have way more freedom than someone that maybe doesn't have a nest egg. But I think that pretty much sums it up for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point to end this video on. So with that, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Financial Podcast. I want to ask you this question. Have you heard about nest eggs before? Are you excited about starting your own, building your own little nest egg, your money machine? And as always, happy investing, guys.